So I am Melissa Robinson. I have attended Shady Grove Wesleyan for 11 years or so now. My husband and I were married here in 2012, and then our girls went to preschool here. They were dedicated in the church here, and then most recently our son Worth. And I would say probably in the past 8 months, we have just really felt led to be more involved with the community and make it more of a priority in our life to have a relationship with not only the church but with God. And you know, He's done so many great things for us, so we just want to be receptive of that. This past year, I was diagnosed on May 17th, 2023, with thyroid cancer. It really came as a shock to us. I had found out that I had a nodule on my thyroid from an incidental finding that was 7 years ago. At that time, I was seeing another doctor who was treating me, and when they found this incidental finding, he said, you know, not really a big deal. I just need to have you see an endocrinologist to make sure everything's okay before I feel comfortable, you know, having surgery, doing surgery on your neck. So at that point, I went to see an endocrinologist. He said, you know what, you don't fit any criteria for me to think anything other than this is just a nodule. He said they're like freckles, everybody's got them, just a lot of people don't know that they have them. So, you know, that was the reassurance I needed, and we went on, and you know, I was more concerned with the other issue I was having at the time, so had the surgery and recovered from that. Fast forward, I guess about 2 years after that, my husband and I felt like we were ready to grow our family again. We already had Olivia and Macy, and so at that time we didn't realize what a long and winding road that was going to be trying to expand our family. But we, you know, found out that we were expecting and go to that first appointment, and they said, yep, you know, pregnant, but we're going to need you to come back. Maybe your dates aren't right. The baby's heart is not as strong as we would like for it to be. So, you know, we tried to think the best, that maybe dates weren't right, and came back, and, you know, it would have slowed down and then eventually would stop. We went on to experience this 3 consecutive times, and at that time it was very isolating because you want to be happy about the blessings that you already have, but yet you feel like, why do I have this desire if, you know, it's not going to come to fruition? So that was a hard time for me. You know, the doctors, when I would experience these losses, unfortunately, some of them happened during COVID, and during that time, you know, things were strict at the hospital, and if you were having a baby, you could have a support person, but if you were having problems such as I was, and would have to undergo surgery, you didn't get to have a support person. So that was hard for me, but I could feel Jesus' presence, and knew that I wasn't alone, even though physically, you know, no one could be with me. So from then, they said, you know, when I started having these losses, they said, well, let's investigate what we can, and do some blood work, because I would have to have a procedure. They had a lot of information they could tell us about the pregnancy to prevent it in the future. And every time it would come back that the baby was normal and nothing was abnormal. So that was even more perplexing, that they couldn't give us a reason, or, you know, it was just all hypothetical why it was happening. Every time I would, get pregnant, we would try a different protocol: blood thinners, hormone replacement, anything that we felt like we could control to try and make a successful pregnancy. We ultimately, after losing 3, decided that, maybe our family was complete and that we had already been blessed beyond measure. And so we kind of came to terms with that. And then we found out that Worth was on the way. So when that happened, we just really, held our breath, and every appointment, it was, until he got here, I don't think I ever really got comfortable with the pregnancy. But I would always try to read and find things. And my best friend, she ended up telling me when I was expecting Worth, she said, the only thing you need to be reading right now is your Bible. And that was so true, because nobody had any other answers for me. So after Worth was born, I started experiencing some real extreme fatigue, just, tired, but also I had, had a baby, and had 2 other active girls at home. And so I went back to my primary doctor and said, I just want to make sure that everything's okay, and, just check in with you and tell you how I'm feeling. So he said, okay, we'll do some blood work, and if everything comes back normal, it's just the fact that you have had another baby and you've got a lot on your plate. So waited for those results to come back, and everything looked fine. Everything was great. And really and truthfully, at this point, I probably would have just been content with that answer, because, I thought, well, maybe that is all it is. But my mom was more concerned, because I've never been as I guess, lethargic as I was during those times. Just everything, it was overwhelming to try and get, anywhere, the girls to school on time, or it was like I could sleep and I just didn't get enough sleep. So my mom had urged me to get a second opinion. So we found, my mom and had learned of a doctor who used to be in Winston-Salem, but she was taking new patients because she had moved practices, and she was practicing in Charleston. So she was supposed to be pretty good at what she did, and we decided we would go see her. And so when she saw me, she said, your lab work looks okay, and but I'd like to do an ultrasound just to evaluate. And when she did, she said, I know you're from out of town, but when could you come back? And I said, well, I don't, when can you get me in? She said, well, I'll put you in for the first available biopsy. And still at that point, I knew what a biopsy was looking for, but being naive and, thinking, again, I don't fit any criteria to be concerned with this. She's just being extra cautious. I came back for the biopsy, and then that was done, and that was the first time the word cancer was said, was at the biopsy. And I remember thinking, well, I knew what you were looking for, but that sounds strange to even say that word. And so she did the biopsy, and she said, she would kind of give me an idea based on what she saw that day, if she thought, she said, I'm not a pathologist, but I've done it enough that I feel comfortable telling you. And she came back and she said, I can't tell you that everything is okay, but I'm not going to tell you it's not either. We're just going to have to see what it says. And so she sent everything off, and she said, I'll call you next week, which happened to be on a Friday, May 17th. And it was just ironic how everything worked out, because my husband, he was supposed to be gone somewhere, but I didn't know what time she was going to call. A friend of the girls had asked if they could come home after school, and so they were at a friend's house, and Worth was asleep, and Jason happened to be home. and she called. And so when she called, I probably was the easiest person ever to give that news to, because I just was so shocked that, she said, I just wanted to call and let you know what this is, and what we need to do about it going forward. And, being shocked, I didn't really know what to say, and I talked a while, and then I told her that I hope she had a great weekend, and I'm sure she hung up and thought she's going to call back with some questions. So, when we initially got that news, I had been told for so long that everything was okay that I just assumed it would be. So after things started setting in, I think I really went through the stages of grief. First it was shock, and then it was, well, that's just not right. They're going to call and they're going to say that's not it. We got your results mixed up with somebody else, and then I went through a point where I felt angry, and here I have this baby that I've worked so hard to get here, and I'm going to have to go through this. And so, I had a lot of different emotions at that time. But I think that once the shock of it wore off, I was able to start seeing God's handprints scattered throughout my story. When I was experiencing some of these difficulties with trying to grow our family, I had written on a card that I kept in my wallet, and it was Jeremiah 29:11. And it said, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And, I started really thinking about that, and I thought, this doesn't make sense to me, but this is not a surprise to God. He knew this. We don't ever know what the provisions are that He's making for us when we're going through these things. So I, talked to my doctor, and she suggested that I go to Tampa for surgery. And she had known my history and the pregnancy losses, and she told me later that she felt like that maybe the reason that the pregnancies wouldn't progress is because my body was trying so hard to protect me, and that God was trying to protect me and to give me a future. And so by protecting me, it would view a pregnancy as an intruder, because it was trying to keep the cancer contained, and it would stop its growth. So from that point, we went to Florida, and they have a hospital there that specializes in endocrinology and endocrine surgery, and they said that based on the pathology that my doctor had done, that it had showed that they were able to see what genes it carried, and that it was positive for a gene mutation that would make this more aggressive than a regular thyroid cancer, I guess, and that, the plan was to just take the left side of the thyroid, but to be prepared that I could potentially have the total thyroidectomy, and then have radiation treatment, the radioactive iodine, after surgery. And they said that most of the times when this type of cancer is discovered, that it had already metastasized by the time that it was found. So that was unsettling, and we were concerned with that and nervous. And I went in for my pre-op, and this whole time I'm trying to not let anybody in my family know my own anxiety of how I'm feeling, but that I'm good, everything's good. It's a fine balance of trying to be strong for your kids, and also trying to come to terms with the news that you have. and what that could potentially mean, and what it could mean, you know, in the future. So, I have always felt like my life has closely paralleled with my dad's mom, my grandmother. And I never got to meet her because she passed from cancer when my dad was 13. She too had a hard time expanding their family, and ultimately, my dad was an only child, and she lost two children in infancy. So I felt like, you know, even though I never met her, I felt like we had a lot in common. And so when, you know, it was always been my understanding from her cancer diagnosis that they had a wait and see approach at that time. So here I am finding out it's cancer. Potentially, you know, we don't know if that nodule at the time was cancer or if it turned into cancer. I don't know if it was cancer all along, but now we knew that it was cancer. And so, you know, you can't help your mind but to start making the parallel that, you know, I might have a similar ending to my story. So, you know, we were concerned with that, and I went through the surgery, and I remember when I was in the recovery room, my surgeon came in and she said it couldn't have gone any better. She said that that the cancer had been contained to the left side of my thyroid, and when they checked the lymph nodes, which is the first place it would spread, there was no metastasis. So we just immediately felt a huge sense of relief, and you know, knew that there was nothing that any doctor had done or anything that we had done or that I had done to make that possible. And I just really, you know, was thankful for his provisions. And people would tell me, you know, as I was going through this and, you know, having a small child and, you know, the girls being in school, and that I was brave, or that I was, and to be honest with you, that was that was not me. That was I had experienced a peace that passed all understanding of anything that I had ever experienced. You know, I think there's times in your life when you know how much your family loves you, and you know they would do anything for you. But there's just some things that only God can do. And for me, you know, it was clearly God, and the prayers that were interceded on my behalf when I didn't have the words to even pray myself, or you know, just the favor of other people, you know, maybe my grandmother and you know, future or previous generations who have you know, made this possible for my story. Now, you know, I still have blood work every 3 months, ultrasounds. I still have a little bit of a rasp you can hear sometimes. It comes and goes when I talk. But, you know, I remember when I was younger, my dad would tell us, and I'm sure it's a quote that many people have heard, but he would say, you know, preach the gospel at all times, but when necessary, use words. And, you know, I've always tried to live so people can see Jesus through me. But when it comes to telling my story, I think you take for granted that everybody's had the same experience, that I grew up in a Christian home, and I didn't necessarily really have, you know, any close experience or encounter to see how it had affected my life. and I make the joke about I don't really like leaving messages on an answering machine. I don't like hearing my voice recorded anywhere. It's going to reverberate because I sound like Peggy Hill. But but I really thought about that when Pastor Denise asked me to share my testimony, and I thought, you know what? The fact that I have a voice, it might be a little raspy at times, but and I've tried to show people, that I want to live a life that's pleasing to God and to Jesus, but to say it and to let people know, sometimes people have to hear it. They have to draw strength from other people's experiences to know what God can do for them. And, I think there are times when I have felt like in my journey, I would give God I would pray, and I would say, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to let God have it and handle it. And then I would take it back, and then I would Google, and I would find out all the statistics as to why it wasn't good, and I would say anybody that's going through a struggle. For myself, I feel like it's just been a gift that God has given me this peace, because I thought, okay, well, I'm always going to worry about what's around the corner. What's the next blood work going to show? What's now that I've had cancer? But, I have this peace that I know that whatever it does show, that God's already there, and He knows what it's going to show. And He is making plans for that, and that while we all will experience things, He will be there every step of the way. And, I would also say that we put so much faith in doctors, and really just, they're just people. And I mean, they're educated people, and they know more than certainly I do. But at the end of the day, they can't tell us, and they don't know. And so I think with that being said, if I went by what doctors thought, I certainly wouldn't be a mother of identical twin girls. The odds weren't in my favor. I wouldn't have my son. We certainly, after 3 consecutive losses, there's not a lot of people that go on to have a healthy pregnancy after that. And I most definitely wouldn't have had cancer at my age. But the truth is that God knew all of those things before they happened. And, He knew it was going to happen, and all the odds that were against me, He just blew them right out of the water. And, I think that's all that we have to know, is that when God decides something, that's what's going to happen, not what somebody thinks.